On his way to the job interview of his dreams, a young black man witnesses an elderly woman collapse on a crowded bus. When the driver heartlessly forces her off at a deserted stop, he can't just sit there. He jumps out, helps her to the hospital, knowing it will cost him the chance of a lifetime. But just when despair sets in, an unexpected email arrives. The woman's son, the very man he had been meant to meet, has found him with an offer beyond anything he'd ever dared to dream. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The alarm clock's shrill scream sliced through the pre-dawn stillness. Darian Blake's arm shot out from under a threadbare blanket, silencing it before the second beep. He lay still, staring at the familiar brown water stain spreading across the ceiling of the tiny studio in Chicago's South Side. It looked like some lopsided continent on an old map, a reminder of the landlord's broken promises and last week's storm. Cold air seeped through the cracked window frame, pushing past the strips of tape and folded cardboard he'd jammed into the gaps. A thin cloud of his breath floated in the gray light. Today, he whispered to himself, more prayer than statement. Today has to be different. He swung his legs over the side of the mattress. Calling it a bed would be generous, and his bare feet found the rough, worn carpet. The springs groaned when he stood. The tiny kitchen was 3 steps away. He moved quietly, every motion practiced to avoid the creaks he already knew by heart. The studio was technically for one, according to the lease, but the building manager knew and pretended not to know that there was an 8-year-old girl sleeping in the other room. Darian eased open the door to the small bedroom they'd converted from what used to be a walk-in closet. Zoe lay curled on the narrow twin mattress, clutching her stuffed tiger. One eye missing, fur matted, but loved into softness. Her braids fanned out on the pillow like a halo. He watched her for a moment, chest tightening the way it always did. This wasn't what she deserved. Peeling paint, rattling pipes, an older brother who came home exhausted and still tried to help with homework at midnight. "You're going to get us both out of here," he murmured so softly the words were for him more than for her. "One way or another." Back in the kitchen, he filled a chip mug with coffee from a $15 secondhand machine. The smell was faint and bitter. The grounds had been stretched too far this week, but it was hot. That was enough. He opened his old laptop on the wobbly table. The screen flickered twice before settling on his inbox, where the subject line he'd memorized flashed back at him. Subject: interview invitation, junior data analyst. He clicked it again, even though he knew every word. "Dear Mr. Blake, we are pleased to invite you for an in-person interview for the junior data analyst role at Lumen Dynamics. Lumen Dynamics, one of Chicago's fastest-growing tech companies. Glass tower downtown, real benefits, actual salary, starting pay, $54,000. To anyone else, it was just a number. To him, it was heat in the winter, a fridge that wasn't half empty, and a future where Zoe's college fund wasn't just something he wrote down in a journal to make himself feel better. He let his eyes drift to the stack of bills on the counter. Rent, internet, electric. The electric bill screamed at him in angry red letters. Final notice. 3 days until shut-off. His stomach knotted. His part-time night shifts at the distribution warehouse barely kept him above water. If he nailed this interview, everything changed. If he missed it, nothing did. His gaze slid to the photograph taped to the fridge. A man in a navy work shirt with E. Blake embroidered above the pocket, standing next to a forklift, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Morning, Dad," Darian said softly. The grin in the picture belonged to a man who had dropped in the warehouse parking lot 3 years ago. Heart attack, 3 weeks after being passed over for a promotion that should have been his. The coroner had written cardiac arrest. Darian knew better. It was the weight of being overlooked, the strain of working double shifts for half the recognition. Black men gotta be twice as good just to stand at the starting line, his father had told him once, staring at a TV news story about layoffs. "Don't you ever forget that, D." He hadn't. He wore those words like armor, and sometimes like chains. Darian drained the last sip of lukewarm coffee and turned to the old wardrobe standing in the corner. Inside, wrapped carefully in dry cleaner plastic, hung his one good suit. Navy. A little out of style. The same suit his father had worn to every interview he ever got. Darian slipped it from the hanger and traced a finger over the lapel. "Help me make this the last time I wear your suit to get a job," he whispered. "Next time, it'll be my own." He'd pressed it the night before, smoothing every wrinkle on a borrowed ironing board until the fabric almost looked new. On the table, his resume waited in a cheap but crisp dark blue folder. He'd splurged on cream paper because the blog post said details matter. He checked his phone. The bus that would take him into the loop was due soon. The interview was at 9, on the 18th floor of a building he'd only ever walked past on his way to somewhere he could actually afford. He had this mapped out down to the minute. Bus, downtown in time to grab a quick bathroom break, fix his tie in the mirror, maybe buy the cheapest coffee in the lobby cafe to look like he belonged. Then arrive at Lumen Dynamics calm, collected, ready. Everything was planned. A soft rustle came from the bedroom. Zoe's sleepy voice floated out. "Darian?" He walked back and leaned down as she rubbed her eyes. "Morning, Z. Is today the big office day?" she mumbled. "Yeah," he smiled. "Today's the big office day." She yawned, then looped her arms around his neck. "You're gonna get it. You're the smartest person I know." He swallowed hard, hugging her tighter. How do you tell a child that the world doesn't exactly work that way, that the smartest person doesn't always win, especially if he looks like you? "You know what?" he said instead. "I'm going to do everything I can. That's enough for today." She pulled back and squinted at him. "Don't let anyone be mean to you, okay?" He laughed softly. "I'll do my best." Soon he was on the sidewalk, breath steaming in the cold, folder tucked under his arm like a shield. The sky over Chicago was dirty gray, but a faint, hopeful strip of pale blue clung to the horizon over the lake. The bus growled to a stop with a hiss of brakes. The doors folded open. He stepped inside and was hit by the normal morning cocktail. Cheap perfume, stale coffee, damp wool, human exhaustion. The seats were already full. He shuffled down the aisle, one hand gripping the overhead bar, protecting the folder with the other as the bus lurched back into traffic. Around him, the city's working class pressed together. A nurse in mint green scrubs scrolling through charts on her phone, a guy in paint-splattered pants nodding off against the window, a teenager bouncing silently to whatever thundered in his headphones. Darian opened the Notes app on his phone. "Tell me about yourself." Raised on the South Side, oldest of two, first in family to graduate from college. Why Lumen Dynamics? Talk about their supply chain optimization project, how he'd followed their last product launch online. He read through each answer, refining a phrase here, adjusting a sentence there. He'd rehearsed them aloud until his throat went dry the night before, trying to sound confident but not arrogant, precise but not robotic. The bus jerked to another stop. More people squeezed in. A stroller bumped his leg. He shifted and glanced toward the front. That was when he noticed her. In the priority seat nearest the driver sat an elderly white woman, late 70s maybe. Silver hair pulled back into a neat bun, a faded navy wool coat buttoned to her throat. A worn leather handbag rested on her lap, both hands gripping the straps. There was something proud in the way she held herself. Her back was straight, even though her face tightened in pain each time the bus hit a pothole. She shifted, trying to ease her weight off one hip. Darian didn't know her name yet. Didn't know that the kids she'd taught for 40 years still sent her Christmas cards. Didn't know she woke up every Friday to take 2 buses across town just to read stories to children who had no grandparents to visit. All he knew was that she looked tired past the bone, the way his father had in the last months, like life kept asking for more than her body wanted to give. Up front, the driver, broad-shouldered, late 40s, permanent scowl carved into his face, grumbled into the radio about being behind schedule. As they rolled toward the river, a sedan cut too fast and too close in front of the bus. The driver slammed the brakes. Time fractured. Darian's body jerked forward, fingers locking on the metal bar to steady himself. He caught the nurse's elbow before she toppled. The teen's headphones flew off. The elderly woman in the front had nothing to grab. Her purse slipped from her hands. She pitched forward off the seat, hitting the rubber floor hard. There was a sick, meaty sound as her hip collided with the edge of the step. Her cry was small but sharp enough to slice through the murmur of the bus. Silence followed, dense and uncomfortable. Darian's heart thudded. He craned his neck, trying to see past the bodies. "Ma'am, you okay?" Someone asked weakly. She tried to push herself up, her face twisted in agony. I, I think, my hip," she gasped. The driver glanced in the oversized mirror but didn't move from his seat. "I can't have people falling on my bus," he snapped. "You hurt, you gotta get off. Company policy. I'm not getting sued." I just, I just need a minute," she panted. "Please, I was heading to—" "We'll let you off at the next stop," he cut in. "Can't block traffic. Everybody hang on." The bus jolted forward again. Darian stared, the scene washing over him in jagged pieces. The old woman trying not to cry, the way everyone avoided eye contact, that bored anger on the driver's face. His mind flashed unbidden to his father in the warehouse parking lot, clutching his chest while coworkers stood frozen, unsure what to do. "Somebody call 911, someone muttered. No one did. 2 blocks later, the bus rolled to a halt, not at a proper stop, a loading zone near a stretch of warehouses in shuttered storefronts. No cafe, no bench, no nothing. The driver thumbed the door switch. "This is you, ma'am." "I can't," she whispered. "Ma'am, you gotta step off. You fall again, I get written up. Rules are rules." She grabbed the nearest rail and, with a grimace that made Darian's own muscles clench in sympathy, hauled herself upright. No one offered a hand. No one slid from their seat. Darian's fingers tightened around the folder until the cardboard bent. Every second that passed was one step closer to the life he dreamed of. A front desk smile, an elevator that smelled like leather and expensive perfume instead of metal and spilled soda. A badge with his name on it at Lumen Dynamics. He imagined himself shaking hands with the hiring manager, making easy, clever small talk. He imagined Zoe running into a bedroom with her own door. Then he imagined that woman on the curb, trying to breathe through pain while buses and cars flew past, not even slowing. His father's words rose again, heavier this time. "Being twice as good doesn't mean being half as human, son." "Stop!" The word left his mouth before he realized he'd said it. Head snapped around. He was already pushing down the aisle. "Yo! Man, what are you doing?" Someone grumbled as he bumped their shoulder. "Driver!" Darian called out. "Stop the bus. I need to get off." The man glared at him in the mirror. "We're between stops." "Then make this one," Darian shot back, breath coming faster. "Please. Now." Something in his voice must have cut through the driver's irritation. With a curse under his breath, he jerked the wheel and eased the bus to the curb, cracking the doors open a few inches. "You get 1 minute," he growled. "After that, we're gone." Darian was already moving. The cold air hit him like a slap as he jumped onto the pavement and took off, dress shoes slipping a little on the damp sidewalk. He ran past a chain-link fence and a shuttered auto shop until the bus they just left was a shrinking box in the distance, and the woman on the curb grew clearer. She was hunched over, both arms wrapped tight around herself, her purse tucked under one elbow. Her face was pale beneath a fine web of wrinkles, her breath coming in short, shaky bursts. "Ma'am?" Darian slowed to avoid startling her, hands raised, folders still clutched in one. "Are you okay?" She flinched and looked up. For a heartbeat, he saw it, the quick, instinctive flash of fear in her blue eyes at the sight of a young black man in a suit running toward her in a deserted industrial street. It didn't surprise him. It still stung. He stopped a careful distance away. "I was on the bus," he said gently. "I saw you fall. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. I'm not here to bother you." The fear in her eyes melted into something closer to shame. She exhaled shakily. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," he said, forcing a small smile. "No harm done. Where does it hurt?" She winced when she shifted. "My hip. It's been bad for years. Should have listened to my doctor, but, well, old habits." She tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "This time, I think I really did something to it." Darian crouched, keeping his weight on his toes, the way he did when he talked to kids at the community center. "My name's Darian," he offered. "Can I help you stand?" or call someone for you. I'm Margaret, she said. Margaret Hensley. My son. He's always in meetings. He worries too much as it is. I didn't want to bother him. I was just going to the north side. I read to the children at the shelter on Fridays. They'll be wondering where I am. Her voice trembled. Darian glanced up and down the street. Still empty. He pulled out his phone and opened a rideshare app. Wait times of nearly 40 minutes blinked back at him. A taxi company said an hour. His stomach dipped. He could walk away, call 911, say he did his part, and keep going. He'd still be late, but maybe he could rush, throw himself at the mercy of reception, or he could stay. Okay, he said aloud, making the choice feel solid. We're not waiting around out here. He slid his phone to the emergency dial and pressed. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, I'm with an elderly woman who fell on a city bus. Possible hip injury. We're in an industrial area off West Fulton and 19th. She can't walk on her own. We need an ambulance. He answered questions, gave cross streets, described her condition. Margaret shivered as a damp wind picked up. Without thinking, he shrugged off his suit jacket, his father's suit jacket, and draped it over her shoulders. You don't have to do that, she protested weakly. You're cold, he replied. I'll live. The ambulance is on its way, the dispatcher said. ETA, about 15 minutes. 15 minutes. He helped Margaret to her feet, letting her lean on his arm, and together they shuffled to a bus shelter a half block down. Just 3 glass panels and a metal bench, the kind he'd leaned against 1,000 times growing up. By the time they sat, the drizzle had thickened, dotting the sidewalk with dark spots. His suit pants soaked through instantly. He didn't care. Margaret watched him tuck his ruined folder under his arm, trying to protect the edges from the rain. You were going somewhere important, weren't you? She asked quietly. He stared at the street for a second. Job interview. A good one? She pressed. The one, he admitted. The kind that comes with health insurance and options. For my little sister. For me. Oh. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh dear, I've ruined your chance. He shook his head. No, ma'am. A bus driver with no heart tried to ruin both our days. I just refused to let him have the last word. Tears welled in her eyes. Why did you come back? Everyone else stayed on that bus. Darian thought of his father alone in that parking lot, of Zoe trusting him to be the kind of man she believed he was. Because somebody should have, he said simply, and if I walked away, I'd have to live with that. The wail of sirens grew louder, echoing between the warehouses. Red and blue lights washed across the wet sidewalk as the ambulance pulled up. Paramedics spilled out in a practiced blur of efficiency. Questions, blood pressure cuff, careful hands lifting Margaret onto a stretcher. One of them, a young woman with tired but kind eyes, looked at him. You coming with her? She asked. He hesitated. If he left now, he'd already missed the interview window. Showing up dripping, without notice, nearly an hour late? They'd never take him seriously. And yet, leaving Margaret alone in a hospital with no family there? He pictured Zoe's face if he told her he'd walked away. Yeah, he said, surprising himself with how steady it sounded. I'm coming. Inside the ambulance, the siren's howl turned the world into a tunnel of sound and flashing light. Darian sat squeezed into a corner seat, jacketless, shirt damp, watching Margaret squeeze her eyes shut against another spike of pain. He glanced at his phone one last time, then locked the screen and shoved it back in his pocket. Whatever happened now, he'd made a choice he could live with. And somewhere, though he didn't know it yet, a CEO who'd built an empire from glass and code was about to have his own life turned upside down by that choice. Monday came with a kind of nervous brightness that made it hard for Darian to breathe. He woke before the alarm, heart already jogging. For a moment he lay there listening to the radiator hiss and pop, feeling Zoe's gentle snore through the thin wall, wondering if the email from Lumen Dynamics had been a dream. He checked his phone. The subject line was still there, real and solid. Rescheduled interview. Lumen Dynamics. He stared at it one more time, as though it could vanish if he blinked too slowly. In the cramped kitchen, he straightened his father's suit again, pressing the lapels between his fingers. The jacket, recently dried from Friday's rain, still carried the faint scent of hospital antiseptic and Margaret's lavender perfume. It felt like a strange kind of blessing. Zoe watched him over the rim of her cereal bowl. "You look like the people on TV," she announced. "Which people?" he asked, tightening his tie in the scratched mirror they kept by the door. "The ones who talk about money and charts and stuff," she said. "You look like you're about to tell the whole world what to do." He huffed a laugh. "Let's start with one conference room," he said. "Then maybe the world." On the bus, a different route this time, he sat near the middle and watched the city shake itself awake. The skyline rose ahead, steel and glass, sunlight glancing off windows like coins. Your life can pivot in one ordinary morning, he thought, on a bus, in a hallway, at a hospital bed. When he stepped into the lobby of Lumen Dynamics, the air felt different, cool and filtered, smelling faintly of citrus and whatever was in the expensive diffuser by the reception desk. The marble floor gleamed. The security desk was all glass and metal. A digital wall behind it rippled with data visualizations, world maps, graphs, numbers ticking up and down in real time. "Good morning," the security officer said without looking up. "Company or candidate?" "Candidate," Darian answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Interview for junior data analyst." "Name?" "Darian Blake." The officer typed something, paused, then glanced at him again with a shade more interest. "You're on the list," he said. "18th floor. Here's your badge. Use any elevator on the left." The elevator ride was too fast and too smooth. His ears popped. He watched the numbers climb and forced himself to take slow breaths. When the doors slid open, the 18th floor hammered his senses all at once. Open concept workspace, rows of white desks, dual monitors glowing with dashboards and code, glass-walled meeting rooms, each with their own digital room placards. People in jeans and blazers, in hoodies and sneakers, moving with the easy confidence of those who belonged. Darian's discount suit felt heavier. The scuff on his left shoe, which he'd touched up with a black marker, suddenly seemed glaringly obvious. "Mr. Blake?" A woman in her 40s approached, tablet in one hand. Her brown hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, and she wore a navy dress that managed to be both efficient and warm. "Yes," he said, standing a little straighter. "That's me." She smiled. "I'm Karen Liu, HR. We've been expecting you. Thank you for coming in again." "Thank you for the second chance," he replied. "Don't thank me," she said lightly. "Thank the person who insisted we reschedule." There was a flicker in her eyes he couldn't quite read. "This way." She led him down a corridor lined with glass walls. He glimpsed what looked like a game room, a cafeteria with a barista bar, a quiet space with armchairs and plants. At the end of the hall, she opened a door to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the Chicago skyline feel close enough to touch. 3 people sat at the glass table. The first was a woman in her early 30s, with a sharp navy blazer and dark curls pulled back from her face, a tablet and stylus poised in front of her. She smiled when he walked in. The second was a man in his mid-40s, thick-set, his tie a bit too tight, arms folded across his chest in a way that said he preferred control to conversation. The third was Lucas Hensley. It took an immense effort for Darian to keep his reaction inside. Lucas wore a different suit today, charcoal instead of black, but his presence filled the room the same way it had filled the hospital doorway. Calm, focused, dangerous in the way only a man who made decisions that moved millions of dollars could be. "Mr. Blake," Lucas said, standing and extending his hand. "Good to see you again." Darian shook it. "You too, Nama, sir." "Please call me Lucas," he said. "This is Dana Ortiz, our HR director, and Greg Halpern, head of Data Insights. They'll lead most of this conversation. I'm just here to listen." Just here, as if CEOs casually sat in on entry-level interviews all the time. "Have a seat," Dana said warmly. He settled into the chair opposite them, placing his new, much cheaper folder of resumes on the table. The interview started as they usually did. "Tell me about your background. What drew you to data analysis? What do you know about Lumen Dynamics?" Darian answered with the ease that came from hours of rehearsal and a core of genuine enthusiasm. He talked about his degree, about the capstone project where he'd modeled inventory flows for a fictional logistics company, about teaching himself new tools at night after warehouse shifts. Dana nodded, occasionally jotting notes. Lucas observed, hands folded, expression unreadable. Greg Halpern, though, was a storm cloud in a dress shirt. He watched Darian with a pinched skepticism, like he was waiting for the punchline to a joke he didn't think was funny. So, Greg said finally, cutting into Darian's explanation of a visualization project he'd done for a local nonprofit. You graduated, what, 3 years ago? Yes, Darian said. I've been working part-time while looking for a full-time role in my field. Warehouse work, Greg said, glancing at the resume, and some freelance dashboards. No previous full-time roles in analytics? Not full-time, no, Darian said carefully. But I've completed multiple projects with... Why is that? Greg interrupted. Plenty of companies are hiring analysts, especially with the market the last couple of years. Darian felt the familiar weight settling on his shoulders. The implication sat between them. If you're so capable, why hasn't anyone else taken a chance on you? He chose his words with care. After my father passed, I became legal guardian for my younger sister, he said. I needed jobs that could flex around her schedule and my obligations. That's why you see night and weekend work here. I kept my skills current with freelance contracts and online courses. I was waiting for the right opportunity, not just any offer. In other words, Greg said, leaning back, your personal life dictated your professional choices. Everyone's personal life shapes their choices, Darian replied, keeping his tone even. What matters is whether I can deliver results once I'm in the role. I'm confident I can. Dana looked between them, sensing the tension. We've had great feedback from the references you listed, she said quickly. Professor Singh spoke very highly of your senior thesis. I'm sure he did, Greg muttered. The old anger flared briefly in Darian's chest. Too familiar, too rehearsed. The sense that he was once again on the back foot, trying to prove he wasn't a risk, a charity case, a diversity checkbox. Lucas shifted slightly, breaking the moment. Greg, he said mildly, do you have any technical questions for Mr. Blake? I'd like to hear his thought process on real problems, not just his resume. Greg's jaw flexed. Fine. For the next 30 minutes, they ran through case questions. Greg pulled up simplified data sets on the big screen. Customer churn, sales over time, anomalies in manufacturing output, and asked how Darian would approach them. Darian forgot about the suit and the window and his burning cheeks and simply thought. He talked through cleaning messy data, about choosing the right visualization for the story the numbers were trying to tell, about avoiding the trap of overfitting models to please a manager in the short term and failing the company in the long term. Dana's eyebrows rose more than once. Lucas's expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. When it was over, Greg capped his pen with a sharp click. Thank you, Dana said. Do you have any questions for us, Mr. Blake? He did. Questions about mentorship, about growth potential, about how Lumen chose projects. But the one that rose to his tongue surprised even him. What does success look like in this role after 1 year? He asked. Greg looked faintly annoyed. Dana smiled. Great question, she said. For me, success would be someone who can not only execute on assigned tasks, but who spots patterns others miss and communicates them clearly. She glanced unconsciously at Lucas. For me, Lucas added, success would mean you're not in the same chair a year from now. It would mean you've outgrown it. Darian nodded. That's what I want, he said simply. Not to sit still. They wrapped up with polite smiles and handshakes. Greg's grip was perfunctory. Dana's was warm. At the door, Lucas walked with him to the hallway. I apologize for some of the edge in there, Lucas said quietly. This isn't how we usually handle junior interviews. Having the CEO in the room tends to make people perform. It's all right, Darian said, though his stomach still churned. I understand concerns about risk. Risk is part of the job, Lucas said. Cowardice, I'm less fond of. We'll be in touch by the end of the day. Which Darian knew usually meant they'd send a polite rejection email just before close of business. On the bus ride home, every bump felt amplified. He replayed the interview in his head, picking apart each answer. Maybe he'd sounded too defensive. Maybe Greg's skepticism had contaminated the room. At home, Zoe greeted him at the door, face eager. How'd it go? She demanded. I don't know yet, he admitted, loosening his tie. I think I did well on the questions. But one of the managers, he sighed. Let's just say he's not my biggest fan. Why, did you do your best? She asked. Yes, he said. Then we wait, she declared, somehow certain. And we eat spaghetti. Heroes always eat after big battles in movies. He laughed, tension cracking just a little. Is that how it works? Yup. They boiled pasta and opened a jar of sauce from the back of the cupboard. Halfway through explaining fractions again, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. His heart jumped. He answered. Hello? Mr. Blake? Karen's voice. This is Karen from Lumen Dynamics. Do you have a moment? Of course, he said, pulse pounding. I'll get right to it, she said. We'd like to offer you the position of junior data analyst. Starting salary, $54,000, standard benefits package, and a projected start date of 2 weeks from today, pending background check. For a second, all he heard was the hum of the refrigerator, Zoe humming under her breath as she lined up meatballs on her plate. Yes, he said, voice cracking. Yes, I'd be honored to accept. Wonderful, Karen said. I'll send the paperwork this evening. And Darian? Yes? Welcome to Lumen. He hung up and leaned back against the peeling kitchen wall, eyes closed. You got it, didn't you? Zoe whispered. He opened his eyes and nodded. She screamed, high and delighted, and threw herself at him. You did it! You did it! We did it, he corrected, hugging her close. This is for both of us. That night, after Zoe had fallen asleep with a math workbook beside her, he opened his old notebook, the one that had once been his father's before he'd started using it as a journal. On a fresh page, he wrote, Today I accepted an offer from Lumen Dynamics, junior data analyst. It doesn't feel real yet. Part of me keeps waiting for someone to say, sorry, mistake, or for the ground to shift again. But another part of me, the part that got off that bus, that walked into that glass tower, knows I earned this. I'm scared, not of the work. How? I know I can learn that. I'm scared of the looks, the questions with teeth, the feeling that I have to be twice as good just to be seen as good enough. I promised Dad I'd take care of Zoe. This is my chance. I can't waste it. I won't. He closed the notebook and set it gently beside the photo on the fridge. In 2 weeks, everything would change. For better or worse, he was stepping into a world where the stakes were higher, the ceilings made of glass and code instead of wood and rust. And somewhere in that building, unseen forces were already deciding which box his name would go into. Asset, risk, token, threat. He would have to choose who he was going to be in the middle of all of it. He turned off the light and lay in the dimness, listening to the city murmur beyond the window. Hold on, kid, he murmured to the version of himself who had sat at that bus stop with a stranger. We're not done yet. Masham. The first weeks at Lumen felt like learning a new language while running a race. Darian arrived early, his access badge still stiff and shiny, and stayed late, long after the sunlight slid off the skyscrapers. He learned names and passwords, and where the good coffee machine was hidden, 2 floors down in a break room the interns swore was enchanted. The work felt right. He dove into data sets like they were puzzles, lines of numbers and timestamps that, with enough patience, unfolded into stories. Where a product was failing, where customers were slipping away, where someone's hunch in a meeting was dangerously wrong, there were bright spots. On his 3rd day, a senior data scientist stopped by his desk. She was in her early 30s with close-cropped hair dyed a deep teal at the ends and a cardigan with tiny embroidered planets. You're the bus guy, she said without preamble. The what? He asked. She grinned. Relax, I mean, you're the one who helped Lucas's mom. I'm Amaya Rivera, senior on the Insights team. I unofficially train the people the official onboarding forgets about. She dropped a USB drive on his desk. On here is my actual onboarding, the stuff you actually need to know. Naming conventions, where the bodies are buried in the data warehouse. Which dashboards are lying to you? Do not tell Greg I gave it to you. Why? Darian asked, lowering his voice. Because he likes people dependent on him, she said. Keeps his kingdom tidy. You're not his favorite person right now. I notice, Darian said. Amaya tilted her head. You're good, she said. I saw the notes from your case interview. Don't let him make you smaller to fit his comfort level. He clung to that sentence on harder days. Because there were hard days. Greg Halpern had a particular talent. He could make a compliment sound like a warning and a correction sound like a verdict. He never said anything overtly wrong. That was the skill. Nothing you could point to and say, that's the line. Instead, he gave Darian the assignments no one else wanted. Endless data cleaning on legacy systems, dull, repetitive scripts that needed to be run and rerun with minor variations. Important work, technically, unseen, uncredited. In team meetings, Greg would summarize everyone's contributions, but somehow leave Darian's name off the slide. When Darian presented a finding, Greg would insist on double-checking the math, even when no one else's work got the same treatment. Once, when Darian suggested a small change to a visualization that would make it more accessible for colorblind users, Greg gave a tight smile. "This is a client-ready chart, not a community center poster," he said. "We don't need to overthink it." The words pricked, but the tone pricked more, as if the very idea of caring about who could read the data was naive. Darian learned to breathe through it, to redirect his anger into precision. Because the work mattered, and because not everyone at Lumen looked at him the way Greg did. Amaya looped him into her projects whenever she could. A back-end engineer named Priyanka quietly forwarded him invites to meetings he'd mysteriously been left off. The receptionist, who had overheard him calming Zoe down on the phone one day when after-school care fell through, kept an unofficial list of people willing to trade shifts so he could leave early when he needed to. Still, the drip of microaggressions wore at him, like small sharp stones in his shoes. Then came the Horizon Motors contract. It was the biggest thing Lumen had landed that quarter, a multi-year partnership with a regional automotive manufacturer trying to reinvent its supply chain with data-driven efficiency. "Make this work," Lucas told the Data Insights team in the kickoff meeting, "and we don't just get a client, we get a case study that could dominate our marketing for years." Greg preened. "We're ready," he said. The project was a beast. Millions of rows of inventory data, shipping time, supplier delays, unpredictable human errors. Models had to forecast demand, optimize warehouse stocking, and predict bottlenecks before they happen. Greg divided the work. "You," he told Darian, pointing with a pen instead of a hand, "will handle data validation. Make sure all the inputs our models are drawing from are clean. That means reconciling source system discrepancies, checking joins, and flagging anomalies." Data validation was thankless. If he did it perfectly, no one would notice. If he missed something, everyone would. "I can also help with modeling if," Darian began. Greg's smile was thin. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Start with the basics. We'll handle the heavy lifts." Darian swallowed his frustration and nodded. "Got it." For days, he lived in spreadsheets and SQL, tracing the edges of the data. He found mismatched time zones that made deliveries look late when they weren't. A supplier that had changed ID formats without telling anyone. Duplicates that inflated stocks by thousands of units. He documented everything meticulously, sending updates to the project channel, making sure there was a record. It was deep in one of those late nights, empty office, the hum of the HVAC system and the distant ding of an elevator, that he saw it. A small discrepancy in one of the forecasting models. The predicted distribution for a certain category of parts seemed off, not dramatically, just a 3 to 4% drift over time. But scale that over a contract this large, and the consequences were massive. Understock in high-demand regions, overstock in slow ones, late delivery penalties, angry clients. He reran the analysis 3 times, recalibrating, checking assumptions. Then he built an alternative model, correcting what he thought was wrong and compared the simulations. The difference was clear: a better fit, tighter error bands, more realistic projections given the historical pattern. He wrote up his findings in a detailed report and sent them to Greg and Amaya. Subject: Horizon Motors forecast model, high priority concern. He expected a reply within an hour. It came 3 hours later, from Greg alone. "Appreciate your diligence, Darian. The variance you're seeing is within acceptable tolerances. We don't want to delay delivery for marginal gains. Stick to validation and let the modeling team handle the models." Greg, he stared at the screen. Marginal gains. A 4% misallocation over millions of dollars of stock was not marginal. He double-checked his numbers, then walked to Amaya's desk. She squinted at his laptop, lips pressed together. "You're not wrong," she said. This does look like an issue. So why is he saying it's fine? Darian asked, keeping his voice low. Because fixing it means admitting the model his pet analyst built isn't perfect, she said, and he's already bragged to Lucas about how ahead of schedule we are. I can't ignore this, Darian said. No, she agreed. You can't. The question is how far you're willing to push. He thought of his father working himself to death in that warehouse, never challenging managers who made bad decisions because the cost of speaking up felt too high. He went back to his desk and opened a new email. This one he addressed to Dana in HR, copying Amaya and Lucas. He attached his analysis, highlighted the risk, and ended with, I'm formally documenting this concern because I believe shipping the model in its current form exposes Lumen and Horizon Motors to avoidable risk. I'm available to walk through the math with anyone who'd like to review. He hovered over the send button for a moment, then he clicked. The fallout landed the next morning. A meeting invite appeared on his calendar. Horizon forecast discussion, mandatory, 15 minutes from now. The attendees list was small: Greg, Amaya, Dana, Lucas, the COO, and him. The conference room was all sharp lines and glass. Greg sat at one end of the table, jaw clenched, shoulders tight. Lucas sat at the other, expression blank. The COO, a woman with steel in her posture, tapped her pen softly on a notebook. Darian, Lucas said, walk us through your concern. Darian connected his laptop and projected his analysis. He spoke clearly, forcing his voice not to speed up. He showed the mismatch between projected and historical patterns, the creeping error, the consequences in real dollars. When he finished, the room was silent. Amaya broke it. He's right, she said. I reran his model independently. The error in our current approach gets uglier the longer it runs. It might be acceptable for a small client, not for Horizon. Greg took in a breath through his nose, slow and sharp. With respect, he said, this is overfitting paranoia. We're within industry standard tolerances. Adjusting the model now would require rework across multiple teams. We have timelines. We have promises to keep. We also have a responsibility not to sell our clients a ticking bomb, the COO said coolly. It's not a bomb, Greg snapped. It's a rounding error. Rounding errors don't accumulate into millions of dollars, Amaya said. Lucas looked from face to face. Do you believe this model will fail our client, Greg? He asked quietly. Greg hesitated. It was microscopic, but Darian saw it. I believe the risk is acceptable, Greg said. This is business. We don't live in hypotheticals. I didn't ask about acceptable risk, Lucas replied. I asked if you believe the model will fail. Greg's eyes flashed. I think focusing on this level of perfectionism is a luxury. We hire junior analysts to learn, not to second-guess decisions 3 levels above their pay grade. There it was. Lucas's gaze hardened. We hire analysts to tell us the truth, he said, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. He turned to Darian. How much time to adjust the model using your approach? A week, Darian said. Maybe less if the modeling team collaborates. But I won't pretend it's nothing. It's real work. Will it improve our confidence? Yes, Darian said simply. Lucas nodded once and looked at the COO. We adjust the model, he said. If we have to call Horizon and explain a minor delay so we can deliver something better, we do that. I'd rather have that conversation than the one we'd have in 6 months when their warehouses are bleeding money. Greg's jaw flexed. You're undermining my authority in front of the team, he said tightly. I'm doing my job, Lucas replied, making decisions based on the best available information. And right now the best information is coming from your junior analyst. The meeting ended. People filed out, murmuring. Darian gathered his laptop slowly, fingers trembling from the adrenaline. As he slipped it into his bag, he felt eyes on him. Greg stood in the doorway, watching him. The look he gave Darian was not one of grudging respect or even anger at being proven wrong. It was colder than that, calculating, like a man deciding how to remove a piece from the board. 2 weeks later, the Horizon model went live in its revised form. Early reports from the client were glowing. The forecasts held, warehouses stabilized, and Lumen got a congratulatory email from Horizon's CFO that made the rounds company-wide. Nowhere in it was Darian's name. What did appear 3 days after that was an email from IT. Subject, urgent, security office meeting required. They wanted to see him immediately. When he arrived on the 7th floor, the mood felt off. The security office was small, blinds half closed. Two men in suits he didn't recognize sat at a table. Their posture screamed investigation. Dana was there too, hands folded tightly in her lap, her usual calm replaced by strain. "Mr. Blake," one of the men said, "please sit." Darian complied, chest tightening. "We've detected an unauthorized export of proprietary client data from the Horizon project," the man said. "Over 2 gigabytes of sensitive files were transferred to an external device from your account last Thursday afternoon." Cold flooded Darian's limbs. "That's impossible," he said. "I didn't export anything. Thursday, I was in the AI ethics training all afternoon. Mandatory." "We have log," the other man said. "They show your credentials were used to access and export the data." "Then your logs are missing something," Darian shot back before he could stop himself. "Because I was sitting in a windowless conference room across the building with 40 other people, watching a presenter talk about bias in machine learning." "Let's keep this calm," Dana cut in. Her eyes begged him to breathe. "We're not accusing you yet, Darian. We're trying to get clarity." "But you've already decided what happened," he said, hearing the tremor in his own voice. "Someone used my login, my machine, or spoofed my account. You think I'd risk everything I've worked for to, what, sell data to a competitor? For what gain?" "We don't make assumptions," the first man lied smoothly. "But until we investigate, we'll need your work laptop and company phone. Effective today, you're on paid administrative leave. You are not to access company systems or contact clients." The room tilted. Paid leave. It sounded benign. It wasn't. It was a scarlet letter. "Someone is setting me up," Darian said, quieter now. "You know that, right? You have to know that." Dana looked like she wanted to say more, but the security officer's presence seemed to press against her. "Cooperate with the investigation," she said softly. "Let the process work. If you're innocent, we'll figure it out." He handed over his devices with numb hands. As they led him to the elevator, the stairs in the hallway cut deeper than any words. To most people, he realized, this was just rumor confirmation. The quiet stories that circulated about him, the bus, the CEO, the promotion of responsibility that hadn't quite materialized, now had a counterstory. Too good to be true. On the street outside Lumen, he stood for a long moment, staring up at the building. The sunlight reflected off the glass panels, bright and cold. He thought of Greg's face in that meeting, the way his eyes had hardened when Lucas sided with Darian. He thought of log credentials, of how easily trust could be weaponized. When he finally started walking toward the bus stop, the old fear surfaced again. The fear that no matter how good he was, no matter how right, the system could still chew him up and spit him out. At home, Zoe's eyes widened when he walked in hours early. "Are you sick?" she asked. "No," he said. "Just complicated day at work." "Bad complicated or math complicated?" she asked. "Maybe both," he admitted, forcing a small smile. "But I'm not fired. Yet. We're not in danger of losing the apartment this week. That's what matters." That night, sleep refused to come. At 2 a.m., Darian sat at the small table, personal laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard. He taught himself more about network logs in 3 hours than he'd ever wanted to know. IP spoofing, remote connections, log tampering. He scribbled notes, drew diagrams, tried to reconstruct any scenario where his credentials could be used without his presence. One thing became clear. To prove his innocence, he'd need access to the deeper logs. The ones behind the polished interface IT showed managers. The records that tracked connection origin, not just user IDs. He did not have that access, but he knew someone who did. At 6:05 a.m., his phone buzzed. Lucas. "Darian," the CEO said without preface, "I just heard about the data breach investigation. Security didn't loop me in yesterday." "Of course they didn't," Darian said tiredly. "It's easier to quietly get rid of a problem junior than ask uncomfortable questions up the chain." "I believe you," Lucas said simply. Silence hovered. "How do you know?" Darian asked finally. "You don't know me that well." I know my mother, Lucas replied, and I know the kind of person she would stake her trust on. I also know who benefits if you're gone. Greg, Darian said. Lucas didn't reply directly. Come to my office in an hour, he said. Use the service entrance on Wabash. I'll clear it with security. We have a narrow window before the machine closes in. Darian stared at the phone after the call ended. A narrow window. He grabbed his jacket, kissed Zoe's forehead, and whispered, I'm going to fix something. I'll be back before school. In the glass tower in an office he'd only seen once from a distance, the balance of power was about to shift. This time he wouldn't be the only one in the room asking hard questions. Lucas's office felt like a different world. It wasn't just the view. Though the view was something out of a movie, the city spread below in grids and veins of light. It was the hush. The sense that decisions made here would echo outward through departments, through households, through lives. On the sleek desk, 2 laptops sat open. One belonged to Lucas. The other had the Lumen security interface pulled up, waiting. I've granted you temporary admin access, Lucas said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Our IT lead owes me a favor. You'll have about 90 minutes before the system logs you out and the request trail gets audited. 90 minutes, Darian repeated, sitting down. His hands trembled slightly over the keys. He pulled up the timestamp for the supposed data theft. 2-point-something gigabytes exported under his credentials, neatly logged. To any manager scanning the summary, it looked damning. He drilled down. Darian traced the access like following breadcrumbs. Each connection record linked to another, IP addresses hopping through proxies. Someone had been careful. They'd routed the connection through multiple internal nodes to muddy the origin. But no one was perfect. Halfway through the transfer, the company network had experienced a tiny hiccup, a momentary dropout, the kind that usually sent a notification to IT and then got filed away. In that split second, the system had re-established the connection and momentarily logged the true originating IP before the proxy wrapped it again. There, Darian murmured. Come on, come on. The raw log spat out a string of numbers. He cross-referenced it against employee network records. The name attached to that IP address made his chest tighten. Gregory Halpern. Of course, Darian breathed. Lucas leaned over, scanning the screen, his jaw hardening. You're sure? He asked. Yes, Darian said. He used admin-level credentials to impersonate my account and export the data from home. I'd bet my life he timed it during the AI training because he knew I'd have an ironclad alibi. By the time anyone looked closely, he expected logs like this to be overwritten or buried. Lucas was silent for a long, simmering moment. Print everything, he said finally, and email a copy to my private account. Then sign out. After that, you and I are going to have a very clarifying conversation with Mr. Halpern. 30 minutes later, Greg entered Lucas's office with the coiled tension of a man who suspected something was wrong, but still hoped it could be bullied back into line. Lucas, he began, I assume this is about the ongoing— Sit, Lucas said. His tone brokered no debate. Greg sat. Across from him, Darian sat as well, a stack of printouts in front of him. The air in the room felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Lucas slid the top sheet across the desk toward Greg. Explain this, he said. Greg glanced down. His eyes flicked across the text, recognition tightening his mouth. These look like network logs, he said. Not my area. It would be better suited. They're from your home IP address, Lucas said, originating a remote connection that used admin credentials to mimic Darian's login and copy Horizon data to an external destination. Time-stamped precisely when Darian was in a mandatory training I also attended. Greg's fingers tightened on the paper. Anyone could have spoofed my home IP, he said. This isn't. Try again, Lucas said, voice dropping in temperature. Greg looked from Lucas to Darian and back, calculation flickering across his face. This is a witch hunt, he said slowly. You're bending logs to match a narrative. The real problem is that you've let this kid— he jerked his chin toward Darian. Get in your head. He's been undermining my authority since the moment he walked in here. Darian flinched internally at the word kid, but kept his face neutral. Greg, Lucas said, we're past narratives. We're in evidence. You stole client data. You tried to frame a junior analyst who had the audacity to be smarter than your ego could tolerate. Why? Color rose on Greg's neck. Because he doesn't belong here, he snapped. He got this job because you felt guilty about something, not because he earned it. You're so obsessed with optics and second chances that you're willing to hand the keys to someone who doesn't understand how this world works. This world? Darian asked quietly. Which world is that, exactly? The one where we don't have the luxury of charity, Greg said, where we don't rebuild models from scratch because some kid with a hero complex wants to show he's smarter than everyone else. The one where we work with people who have put in the years, not sob stories at bus stops. Silence landed in the room like a hammer. Lucas inhaled once, slowly. Greg, he said, you're fired, effective immediately. Greg's mouth fell open. You can't. I can, Lucas said. You attempted to compromise a flagship client, endanger our reputation, and destroy a colleague's career. Because you felt threatened. Security will escort you out. Legal will be in touch regarding charges and the terms of your severance, which will be minimal. You're throwing away 8 years, Greg spat. I'm protecting the next 8, Lucas replied, and the people who might have trusted you with their livelihoods. Security arrived. Greg stood, face white, eyes burning holes in Darian. This isn't over, he hissed. Guys like you think one lucky break means you're safe. It doesn't. The world will remind you where you came from. The world's not a monolith, Darian said, surprised by his own steadiness. Some parts of it are trying to do better. Greg snorted and allowed himself to be led away. The door clicked shut. Lucas exhaled, rubbing his temples. I should have seen this sooner, he said. You have a lot to see, Darian replied. He was good at hiding. That doesn't make this less my responsibility, Lucas said. He looked up. Darian, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you restitution. I'm not looking for, Darian began. I know what you're not looking for, Lucas cut in. That's why I trust you with what I'm about to say. He folded his hands on the desk. I want you to lead data insights, he said, effective immediately, with a substantial raise and full authority to hire, fire, and restructure as you see fit, within budget. Darian's brain momentarily refused to process the words. Lead? He repeated. As in, Greg's role? As in more, Lucas said. We've outgrown the old structure. We need someone who not only understands the math, but the stakes, the human side of our work. That's you. I've been here 3 months, Darian said, half protesting, half marveling. I started this company in a garage with a credit card and an unreasonable dream, Lucas said. 10 years later, people who were with me in that garage were running entire divisions. Time served isn't the only metric that matters. Darian swallowed. People will talk, he said. They'll say I'm here because of your mother, because of the bus. Let them talk, Lucas replied. You'll have plenty of chances to show them why they're wrong. He slid a folder across the desk, so similar to Darian's own that first day, but heavier. In here is the formal offer, he said. And something else. I want to start a scholarship program, full rides for students in underfunded communities who want to study STEM. You've seen firsthand how hard it is to break in without resources. Help me design something better. This would be part of your portfolio if you accept. The idea hit Darian harder than the promotion. Scholarships. Students who look like him and Zoe. People who might otherwise be stuck staring at unpaid tuition bills and closed doors. He thought of his father, who'd wanted to be an engineer before life dragged him into a warehouse and never let him leave. I don't know how to run a scholarship program, Darian said honestly. You didn't know how to unravel a sabotage attempt either, Lucas said. And yet, here we are. Darian looked down at the folder, then at the city beyond the glass, then at his own hands, scarred, calloused from years of warehouse work, now hovering over a different kind of machinery. He thought of Zoe, already better at fractions than he'd been at her age. He thought of the kids at the shelter where Margaret read stories. He thought of getting off that bus. Yes, he heard himself say. I'll do it. I'll lead the team. I'll build the program. But if I mess up, I expect you to tell me. Lucas smiled. Deal, he said, but I have a feeling you'll be the one telling me when we need to be braver. The next few months blurred into work of a different kind, Darian stepped into his new role with equal parts determination and fear. There were missteps, awkward moments, people who resented his promotion, whispers that traveled faster than emails. He addressed them the only way he knew how, with clarity. He met with each team member one-on-one. He listened. He changed what needed changing, kept what worked, and never pretended he had all the answers. Amaya became his unofficial second-in-command, her irreverent brilliance balancing his intensity. Together they restructured workflows, opened communication channels, and instituted a policy. If you saw something wrong in the data or the culture, you were not only allowed but expected to speak up. The scholarship program took shape in late-night planning sessions and community meetings. They called it the Lumen Scholars Initiative, full tuition, stipends for living expenses, mentorship from Lumen staff. The selection criteria centered on grit and potential, not polished resumes. At the first selection meeting, Darian found himself arguing passionately for a student whose grades dipped junior year when she'd taken on another job to help her family, but whose essays burned with resolve. Merit isn't a smooth graph, he told the committee. Sometimes it's a jagged line because life gets in the way. That jaggedness is exactly why these scholarships exist. They chose her. They chose 36 others. The day the first cohort visited Lumen, wide-eyed and nervous, Darian watched them step off the elevator and felt something loosen in his chest. This was bigger than Horizon Motors, bigger than one glass tower. At the all-hands meeting where the program was formally announced, Lucas called Darian to the front. This is the person who pushed us to do more than issue press releases about diversity, Lucas told the assembled staff. He embodied our values when we hadn't fully articulated them. It started on a bus, it continued in a conference room. It's going to ripple out in ways we can't imagine yet. The applause washed over him, terrifying, humbling. Afterward, as people clustered around to shake his hand, he saw two familiar figures near the back. Zoe, slightly taller now, her braids longer, and Margaret, standing with a cane but straighter than he'd seen her in the hospital bed. "You didn't tell me you were speaking today," Zoe scolded, hugging him. "You had school," he said. "Margaret picked me up," she said. "She said some days are more important than attendance." Margaret smiled. "I filed it under life education," she said. "No principal can argue with that." She pressed an envelope into his hand. "For Zoe," she added, eyes daring him to protest. He opened it and nearly dropped it. The number on the check was obscene. "I can't." "You can," Margaret said. "You will. That girl is going to change the world. We might as well make sure tuition isn't the thing that slows her down." The months rolled on. The Lumen scholars arrived on campus that fall, some the first in their families to set foot in a university classroom. Darian visited once a month, sitting in on workshops, listening to their struggles. The imposter syndrome, the culture shock, the pressure of being the one who made it from their block. He told them about the bus, about the hospital, about the conference room where he presented evidence that could have ended his career if he'd been wrong. Courage isn't the absence of fear, he told them. It's naming what matters to you more than your fear and acting from that. He repeated it to himself on the days the weight felt heavy. 14 months after that bus ride, another plaque was unveiled, this one at a renovated bus shelter on the south side, the Marcus Blake Memorial Stop. "In honor of those who stop when others pass by," the inscription read. A small crowd gathered, Lumen employees, scholarship students, community members, kids from the shelter where Margaret still read every Friday. A reporter from a local station fiddled with her mic. A pastor from the neighborhood church stood with his hands folded. Lucas spoke first, then Margaret, then one of the scholars, a young man who talked about working overnight shifts and studying by flashlight because his power had been cut off. Finally, they handed Darian the microphone. He looked out at the faces. Zoe in the front row, eyes bright. Amaya leaning against a pole, pretending not to be emotional. Lucas standing a little off-center, hands in his pockets. Margaret beaming. "My father used to say the world wasn't built for people like us," Darian began. He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't completely right. He gestured at the plaque. "This bus stop used to be just another place where people waited and were ignored. Now it carries a name. Now it tells a story. Not just mine or my father's. Yours. The story of every person who decides that someone else's pain is their business. He paused. A year and some months ago, I got on a bus thinking only about myself, he said. About my suit, my resume, my shot at escaping the grind. Then I saw someone fall, and I had to decide which story I wanted to tell about myself when I went to sleep that night. He glanced at Zoe. I wanted to be the kind of person my little sister deserves, he said. So I got off. I didn't know that the woman I helped had a son who ran a tech company. I didn't know that moment would change my career. I didn't do it for reward. He looked back at the crowd. We don't control the twists of the story, he said. We control our choices inside them. The world taught my father that kindness was a liability. I'm trying to teach my sister and these students, and myself, that it's actually our greatest leverage. He pointed at the shelter's new roof, at the bench, at the plaque. This isn't a monument, he said. It's a reminder that revolutions don't just happen in parliaments or boardrooms. They happen in the split second when one person decides to stop and another keeps walking. He lowered the mic slightly. So the next time you're late, he said, and you see someone struggling at a stop like this or on a street like this, remember, your dream job will not crumble because you took 5 minutes to be human. But your sense of who you are might if you never make time for it. There was a hush. Then applause rose, not explosive, but steady, like rain building into a storm. Later, after the speeches and the photos and the awkward interviews, Darian and Zoe walked home as the sky burned orange over the city. Hey, Darian, Zoe said, swinging his hand. Yeah? If you hadn't gotten off that bus, she said, do you think someone else would have? He thought about the faces that had turned away, about the driver's impatience, about how easy it is to convince ourselves someone else will step up. Maybe, he said, but I'm glad I didn't wait to find out. She nodded, satisfied. Me too, she said, because then I wouldn't get to tell people my brother runs a whole department and a scholarship thing and has his name on a bus stop. The bus stop has Dad's name, he corrected gently. Same thing, she replied. You're both in it. He smiled, feeling the truth of that sink down to the place where grief and pride had fused into something new. Back in the studio, still small but warmer now, the electricity bill paid on time, and a file marked Zoe College growing thicker on the counter, he opened his notebook again. He wrote, Today we unveiled a plaque at a bus stop where I once made a decision that terrified me. People keep calling me a hero. I don't feel like one. I feel like a kid who got off a bus because his father taught him that someone else's pain is never invisible. But maybe that's all a hero is, a person who refuses to pretend they don't see. If you ever read this, Zoe, and you're standing somewhere between your dream and someone else's need, I hope you know this. The world will tell you there's not enough time, not enough money, not enough space to care. That's a lie told by people who profit from us looking away. You are allowed to stop, to help, to lose something that looks important so you can keep something that truly is, yourself. Because sometimes missing one dream job is how you find the life you were actually meant to build. When he closed the notebook, the city hummed outside. Buses still running, people still choosing every second who they were going to be. Somewhere on a route that cut across the south side, a driver slowed more carefully at a stop. An elderly passenger gripped the rail a little tighter. A student on the shelter bench glanced up at the plaque and read the words without fully understanding them yet. The revolution was not finished, but it had started. One bus, one stranger, one young man who refused to stay seated when kindness asked him to stand. If you're watching this, if this story found its way to you across screens and continents, remember, your choice might feel small, but the ripple can be enormous. So if this touched your heart even a little, don't just scroll away. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, share a time you chose to stop for someone, and hit like and subscribe so more people are reminded that doing the right thing still matters. Because who knows, the next life that changes might be your own.